This podcast is a collaboration between Costard and Touchstone Productions and the Dads from the Crypt podcast.
People all set for the show?
No.
Well, if you don't know what to do, you just follow me, because this is my 5th time here as host, and I'll try and, set everything up so it'll be easy for you. Have you seen a script yet?
No. We've only been given one line.
Well, can I hear it?
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
Hello and welcome to another episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. I'm Alan Katz. In honor of it being September at the time that I'm recording this episode, I'm haunting that part of my long-distant past, back when I was a student at VASSAR College. I really enjoyed my college experience. It was a very good time socially, and even better creatively. I was in the drama department a few years after an actress named Meryl Streep had blown the doors off the place. She graduated in 1972, I think. I got there in 1977, and they were still talking about it and predicting the moon, the stars, the whole rest of the universe for her. They weren't wrong. Vassar was a great place to grow, personally and creatively. I had the honor of directing a drama department show as my senior project, a production of August Strindberg's Dance of Death, newly translated from the Swedish for the production by my department advisor, one of the world authorities on Strindberg and Ibsen, Professor Everett Springshaw. It was a very cool experience. I got an A. My lead was an actress named Connie Crawford. After Vassar, Connie would go on to Juilliard. She became a member of the acting company and toured America for 2 years. She appeared both on and off Broadway, acted in soap operas and lots of small independent movies. Eventually, she became a theater professor at Brown University, one of the Ivies. She's done well by herself, but confession, I've always been desperately jealous of Connie, because she was on Saturday Night Live in a couple of sketches, while she was at Vassar. She got to say the words, "Live from New York, it's Saturday night." How that happened, what the whole experience was like, we talked about it all in this episode recorded earlier this season. And we talked about everything else Connie's doing now, including some fascinating work with horses and actors. She uses the horses to get the actors to be better actors. If you're not familiar with horse therapy, stick around. It's amazing what horse therapy can accomplish. We also zoomed in on the casting business and how it can wreak havoc on young actors. Old actors too, but especially the young ones, as they're coming into the business and learning not only their craft, but the business of being a craftsperson. It's not like any 9-to-5 job. And while casting is necessarily competitive, there are elements of negative commodification that do need to be addressed. Connie articulated it far better, as you'll hear. One more note before we start. Please forgive the technical issues that crop up about an hour in. We tried a new recording platform, and I'm being kind, we fucking hated the results. So there's a little patch job in place. Actually, if you're not looking for it, you'll probably miss it entirely anyway. But don't miss Connie, or we'll both come and haunt you.
Well, you've been on the faculty at Brown University for 20 years.
Yeah.
How's the weather in Providence today?
Freezing. It's brutal.
Oh, geez.
It's 14 degrees with wind chills. So
I'm up in Vancouver, Canada, where we just had a foot of snow. And then it snowed for 2 days. It was great. Then the rain came and washed most of it away. But we got a lot of snow. And it's warmed up now. It's like almost 40 degrees.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
If it's any consolation to you both, as I sit here in Los Angeles today, it's raining.
It's raining?
It's raining. It's raining in LA. We're supposed to have rain all weekend. We're not getting the worst of it. The Northern California is getting another atmospheric river.
Yeah.
Hey, we need the water desperately. I think most of the state of California is now out of a drought. So hooray, hooray. What do you love about teaching at Brown?
Are we recording?
Yes, we are.
Oh, what do I love about teaching at Brown? Well, the students. And, that's it. The students are amazing.
Yeah.
And so, they come from all around the world. I get all sorts of different people. The theater department is very small, so I get a lot of students interested in other things. But the other thing I like is I like having my own studio to do the things that I wanted done when I was in studios, specifically in colleges and after college at Juilliard.
You have your own little version of a powerhouse theater?
Yes, but it's not as nice as the Powerhouse.
You were so lucky.
We were so lucky. The Powerhouse was a great space.
What a toy.
Yeah.
An amazing.
Did I hear you say you came out of Juilliard?
Yes. So after I went to Vassar, I took a year off, and then I went to the Juilliard program for acting.
Would you say there's a difference between a typical Brown student and a typical Vassar student?
Yeah, I think we were a little wilder. I think we were a little looser. These students have to work so freaking hard to get in that they come in a little correct. And there's a lot of undoing. Whereas I think we all kind of just fell in. And Vassar, wasn't as hard to get into back then. And so I think we were just wilder. I think we were more willing to experiment. And also I think we were meaner. We were meaner to each other. We were more racist, sexist, they're a lot kinder to each other, and they accept things with a lot more grace and just openness than we knew how to do. I think, it's not who we were, it's what we did.
Before Vassar, what part of the world did you come from?
Well, I was born in New York City, and then I lived just an hour north in Westchester.
Where in Westchester? Yeah.
Well, originally in Bedford, and then Katona.
I'm from Yonkers.
Oh, yeah. What is that great film about the mayor of Yonkers?
I don't know. Do you know the film about the mayor of Yonkers? I thought you were the mayor of Yonkers, Gil.
Yeah, maybe it was about you, Gil.
Right.
I could be wrong. Maybe it's not Yonkers. Maybe it's, but I don't know. We'll look it up and follow up with that. Because if it's the one I'm thinking of, it's brilliant.
Huh. Well, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Brett Goldstein, our classmate. Do you recall what you wrote for your essay to get into Vassar?
No.
You don't? Okay.
No, you got to understand. I came out of what was called the open community school. It was no grades.
You were one of those kids. Oh.
That school had 50 students, and it was kindergarten through 12th grade.
Wow.
So I was in a graduating class of 2. And so I was the bottom of my class.
That is hilarious.
And that school ended up falling apart and becoming a real, psycho weird place. So I technically never graduated from high school.
I think they moved that school to Yonkers.
Point is, I don't know how the hell I even got an application in. It was such a mess at that time, and I was half out of my mind. But I do remember my interview. And I remember that I just really clicked with the interviewer. And because I just thought I didn't have a chance. And
why did you choose Vassar? Or why did you want to go to Vassar?
Yeah, because my grandmother and my great-grandmother went there.
You were legacy.
Yeah. And my grandmother loved it. Also, it was small, and it had there were no classes you had to take.
Yeah, it's about like math or science. Exactly right. Hey, no math or science? I'm there, man. I'm there. Plus, the drama department was small. It was intimate, and
Yeah, well, I actually wasn't that interested in drama. I was interested in literature. So I was a double major. I ended up studying Old English and Middle English.
What about Old English and Middle English appeals to you?
Well, I wanted to work my way up to Shakespeare. So I figured I'd start with Old English. And also I was studying German, so it was kind of in the same pool. And because I just loved Shakespeare, I loved literature. And then when I was at Vassar, there was an incredible teacher named Julia McGrew who taught Old English. And studying with her was incredible. So we read Beowulf, and then with her we read a lot of Chaucer and other, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight in Middle English. And she was just amazing. And after I graduated, I went to visit her because when she retired to a pig farm in Denmark. And she
As one does. A pig farm in Denmark. Wow. And so you visited her on the pig farm in Denmark.
Oh, yeah. It was amazing.
How was the pig farm? Yeah.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Big pig farm, little pig farm?
Well, it's old-fashioned. So basically the house, if you looked at it from the air, it made a rectangle with an open, space in between the buildings so that you never had to go outside. So the pigs could be across the courtyard, but you never had to walk out to feed them. And she also bred these cool little weird dogs, and it was super fun. And so, feeding the hogs in the morning and then having the big Danish breakfast.
What is a Danish breakfast?
Well, what I'm thinking of, I call it a Danish breakfast because it was my experience, which was after you do your chores, they just lay out food. And of course, incredible bacon, sausage, but the cheeses, the coffee, the milk, it was incredible. And you were super hungry because, I didn't do any of the work because they wouldn't let me, but those farms, they were small. The ones I saw, it's how pigs should be raised.
I'm surprised, Alan, you don't know about a Danish breakfast. I used to have a Danish breakfast every day when I lived in Manhattan. I lived in New York. I used to go in and get a prune Danish from the deli and a cup of coffee.
All right, so you had one great professor at Vassar who would you say she altered the course of your life?
No, but I didn't think I would stay so deep in it, in that study. And I just ended up doing so many plays that come my senior year, I was like, oh, I've got enough credits to do a double major.
Which, bravo, by the way. Bravo, well done. That is harder than it looks.
Yeah, it was.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Were there any other professors at Vassar that you still think about a lot?
Oh, yeah, a lot. There was another professor in the English department named Walter Di Maria, who was just a... Yeah, no, it was.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Were there any other professors at Vassar that you still think about a lot?
Oh, yeah, a lot. There was another professor in the English department named Walter Di Maria, who was just a really... Did you ever study with him?
I didn't. He was not one of the ones because I took a number of classes in the English department too.
Yeah, he was great. I remember studying Wallace Stevens with him and also a literary criticism with him. And he was just great. And I got along really well. But, listen, the people in the theater department were also really important to me. And listening to you and Brett talk about them was a lot of fun. And I don't want to wax too memory because...
Go to town.
Everybody else is interested, but
screw them. It's our podcast. We do whatever the hell we want.
But William Rothwell was an incredible, truly incredible person. Not the greatest teacher by the time we got to him, because he was usually drunk. He was a mess.
That raises a question. Had he been a noteworthy teacher at any point? I'm not aware of this.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, all right.
But I assume so, because I could tell that he loved good acting. He loved Tennessee Williams. He loved them like deeply. But I always think of him as Miss Havisham, because he was locked into a period of time.
Gosh, yes.
And that was it. As you and Brett talked about, he would show up in full hunt apparel, boots and jodhpurs and the coat, and half out of his mind, he's so drunk. And he also had this way of talking, and he'd roll into, I remember our senior acting class, we hardly ever had it. I don't know if you were in the same class I was, but he would roll in and say, "You're all exhausted, go home." You remember that?
Yeah, I don't, but senior year is I remember a lot, but man, it was very blurry because so much was happening, both in real time, but also emotionally, psychologically.
Yeah.
It was utter chaos. I don't remember a lot of my academics from senior year. I just remember the extracurricular stuff, and it was all such as what we got to do together. When we first got to Vassar, though, in our freshman year, as we're all sorting each other out. Now, obviously, you were a fan of Saturday Night Live.
Oh, yeah.
Back to the beginning.
Oh, yeah. Because I remember I grew up in a house where we did a lot of drugs. So my mother grew marijuana. And so by the pool in Westchester, instead of a garden, was marijuana plants.
What did your folks do?
Well, they were separated. So my father was a hardcore conservative right corporate lawyer. And my mother was just this wild entrepreneur, poet, person who was incredible. Like, she would do things like around 72, she staged a poetry reading with William Burroughs, and nobody came because he was deemed sort of passé. You know what I mean? He hadn't yet been out of the limelight long enough for people to go, "Oh my God, he was great." And so she would do things like that. She was really interested in art and promoting art. Like, who is the director who did Sweet Sweet Badass Song?
You're not talking about Melvin Van Peebles, are you?
Yes, that's it. Right?
Really?
Melvin Van Peebles. Well, what was his son's name?
Mario.
Oh, Mario.
That's
Van
right.
Peebles.
Yeah, Melvin Van Peebles.
Wow.
Yeah. So she would, back him in some incredible theater piece in New York that, I of course never saw it because I was too young. But so she was just really interested in the arts.
I was great friends with Melvin.
You were?
Yeah, because I started out in theater in New York as well. And Melvin had an apartment above the Carnegie Deli.
Wow.
Right above the Carnegie Deli. So anytime Melvin wanted to see me, he would call me and he'd say, "I need to talk to you. Why don't you come on over?" And I'd go, "Well, Melvin, I'm doing this, I'm doing that." And he goes, "Listen, if you come over, I'll get a sandwich from the Carnegie Deli. I'll bring it upstairs. We'll split it." And if I was really cagey, I could sometimes get him to get me a bowl of soup as well. But I knew Melvin until he passed. And he lived in that apartment all that time.
Wow. So what's, so you must remember some of the theater stuff.
Yeah, 2 plays, I can't remember the names of them. It'll come to me in a minute. That were very successful on Broadway. But he was really a delightful person to be with. I loved being with Melvin. We just got along so well.
I'm going to drag us back to SNL. You were a fan going way back. You
it comes to drugs is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. It comes to drugs.
Doesn't it always?
So one night, of course, what do? You smoke some pot and you get high and you watch TV. So I'm watching TV and I suddenly see this commercial, and I think it was something about Chevy Chase is like a psychiatrist on call or something. And of course I didn't know what Chevy Chase was. And I remember just going, what is this? What? This is so, what the fuck is this? And then it went into the next piece. I'm like, holy shit, this is a show and it's live. And that was it. That was it. I mean, it really caught me. And Mr. Bill was on at that time. And wow. You're high and you're just like, you've never seen anything like this. And so much of it back in that time was political, because they had all those Harvard Lampoon writers. And I mean, it was, and of course, that time was, Anyway, so yes, I was a huge fan. And I'd even written Dan Aykroyd a fan letter. I'd never done anything like that, so.
Every one of the original Not Ready for Prime Time players, they became iconic. I know in my head, those, not only we wanted to be them, really desperately wanted to be them, but what kind of path was there for any one of us just watching the show? There was no way to get from point A to whatever point that was.
Connie and I were freshmen when SNL entered its third season. In season 2, Chevy Chase had left, Bill Murray had arrived. They were still in flux. Thinking outside the box, SNL came up with a cool idea.
Anyone can host. And I think there were going to be 5 finalists, and one of those in the audience was going to vote on one of those finalists, and that person would get to host an episode of SNL. I cannot imagine how many, they must have, the inundation of postcards, because you didn't get a whole lot of time to work that room. You had a 3x5 postcard, as I recall.
Yeah.
And there was a word limit, 25 words or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, 25 words or less, why you should be the host of SNL. And I can actually remember what I wrote. It was so fucking stupid. I can't believe I wrote that and thought that was, because when I heard what you did, it's like, wow, you were so outside the box. What was your solution to that problem?
Yeah, so I stapled my Vassar ID to a Holiday Inn postcard and just wrote "Free Me," and the picture was of course one of those pictures, but underneath it in big black letters it says expires 6/15/78, and but again it comes to drugs. I got the idea tripping on acid, and I remember exactly where I was. You were in Noise. You and Brett talked about that cool Noise dormitory, and there was this beautiful, the building was kind of roundish, and then there wasn't.
Where were you living? What dorm were you in, freshman? Oh,
Cushing.
Sure, wow.
So I was right next door, but old-fashioned building. So I was in what they call 2SQ, and SQ stood for servants' quarters, because it used to be when the rich ladies would come to Vassar, their servants would live in these little tiny rooms, but it meant I got a single as a first year, which was great. Near Noise, the Noise dormitory, there's this big, beautiful round field, and around the edges of that field was this cool little wood area. And it was so beautiful. I mean, Vassar campus, let's just say, it's so beautiful.
Extraordinary. Really wonderful to spend 4 years there.
Just fantastic. And so I was in those woods with a friend, and we were tripping, and I don't know why, but I pulled out my ID and I said, oh my God, wouldn't it be awful to be the person who lives in there? And so we started saying, oh yeah, and you can't do anything without your ID card. So if the ID cards staged a revolution, the whole institution would shut down. So, we're running around the woods with our cards, staging their revolution. And I said to myself, yeah, that's it. My card is going to sacrifice itself to freedom and slip out of my pocket at night. It's going to, one of its mates, it's going to staple it to the Holiday Inn postcard. And it's going to, of course, they didn't get the subtleties of the political statement I was trying to make.
Okay, but you're getting to explain them now. And it's genius. It's genius. Hey, it got you the gig, didn't it?
Yeah. It was really fun. It was a fun experience.
What was it like? All right, all of us are watching the mailbox, thinking, "Oh God, please let it be me." How did they tell you it was you?
Yeah. So again, I mean, it's so funny to realize how technology has changed our lives, but nobody had phones. You didn't have phone in your room. There were these old, in Cushing dorm, there was an old series of phone booths, with the wooden doors, like in a Raymond Chandler movie. And then when somebody called, there was a person, who would take messages and they'd fold them and put them in your little slot. And so that's how I found out was, the talent coordinator left me a message, and then I had to go to the phone booth and feed it and call.
What did the message say?
It said, call Barbara Burns, talent coordinator, Saturday Night Live.
All right. So it didn't say you're a finalist.
Oh, no. Because they had to, do some screening. And so they talked to me on the phone. And then I had to send in.
What did they want to know? What were they screening out? What were they afraid of you being?
Well, they could get anybody. I mean, I think they wanted to make sure you were going to be relatively sane. And also they were looking for categories, so they had the 80-year-old grandmother from New Orleans. They had a mother of three from Peoria, Illinois. They had the college dropout from Oregon. They had the governor of South Dakota was one of the finalists. Yeah. And then I was the Vassar co-ed, because at that time, Vassar being co-ed was new.
Right.
So, they were basically looking for types. And so it was just a little bit of a process.
Then you give her a call and she tells you.
Yeah. So then, again, I would, it would be this relay and I would get these little folded messages. And so after, some conversations and stuff, she said, call Barbara Burns. And then she said, yeah, you're it. And come to New York tomorrow. And Vassar's only an hour or so from New York. So it was just, yeah, here we go.
How would you describe? All right, I assume that was good news. And
oh my God, yes. I mean,
what noise? How would you describe the noise you made?
I don't know. I mean, so I still am very good friends with two of my friends who were in the dorm, and they knew about it. So we just all, hooted and hollered and.
Who were these?
So
these
Carol
people?
Goodman, who is an author. She's a great author. She writes a lot of wonderful mystery books. And Gary Feinberg. And Gary is a real estate person in Miami and a painter. And then Shari Norton. Do you remember Shari?
I do.
Yeah, Shari was the hipster from Manhattan. And she was the first person to have purple in her hair that I ever saw. And she recently died, which is too bad. But anyway, so it was super exciting. And going down, it was just beyond exciting. It was, and, what are you going to do? I mean, it's too exciting. You just can't believe that I'm
nothing. It's a pure pinch me moment from start to finish.
Oh, yeah.
And you got to meet the cast, but you got to work with some of the cast?
Yeah, well, work with, I mean, I wouldn't say that, because they just, they kept us in kind of a clump and they'd stick us in a scene and, kind of move us around as a unit. Although, so the first thing was I went to the Marriott in Manhattan, and they said, okay, come to this room. And I show up in the room, and it's Gary Weiss and his
filmmaker. Mm-hmm.
Right. And because he used to do those short films. He was kind of the Robert Smigel, doing these really cool, they didn't have to be funny, really.
It could be esoteric. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good word. Yeah. And anyway, and then there's Buck Henry, who was the host of the show. And so you're like, holy shit, it's Buck Henry, one of the funniest human beings ever. And anyway, so they said, okay, here's the deal. Each one of you is going to bribe Buck so that you'll win. Each of us filmed a little thing with Buck. So I was on a podcast with, and I wish I could remember their name. I should have looked it up. But there's a group of super fans of Saturday Night Live who do a podcast about, and I mean, they go deep into all the facts and their yeah. So if you ever, I mean,
we will link to that podcast. It does go far deeper than we're going to go.
Yeah, no, but, I mean, they're super fans. It's they love it. I'm 18 at this time, and they say, okay, Connie, so when it was my turn, they say, what to do to bribe Buck Henry, right? And so it was kind of interesting of like, oh yeah, okay, what does the young woman do? I seduce him, or I try to. And so, that's what you did. You just did it. And it was very, very short.
Hi.
Congratulations on being one of the finalists.
Thank you.
It's terrific.
Oh, I know.
I guess everyone up at
VASSAR.
Is pretty excited about it.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. They're all, quite excited. I am too. This is a big thing for me.
Oh, it's nice for us too.
And I'm certainly glad that you're the host. Geez, if anyone else was the host, I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't know how to feel comfortable with them. But somehow with you, I'm instantly comfortable, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Are you sort of interested in becoming a host?
Hostess? Oh, am I interested? I've never been as interested in my life. Do me a favor.
Sure.
Just one little favor. Take off your glasses. Oh, that's what I like to see.
Well, Connie.
Bucky boy.
So it was basically just an improv.
Oh yeah, it was just an improv, and they used the first one because after that, you know how it is.
Connie.
Well, but you know how it is. Sometimes you hit fresh, and they're
improv,
right? But the fun, although that was super fun, and Buck Henry was very, he was great because he was very not threatening, but he wasn't invasive in any way, and he was just a gentleman. And but
we had the pleasure of working with Buck on Tales from the Crypt.
Did you?
And you seduced him the same way, I think.
It's funny, we got to work with some of the coolest people in showbiz doing that show. Of all the people that I got to work with, he was the most, to me, that was the person that I was most, oh my God, we're going to get to work. Buck Henry's going to do the show because he wrote The Graduate and Catch-22 and Get Smart, and he was on SNL. He did some of the funniest sketches on SNL, and he was a lovely man. I feel truly honored. We wrote a song for the episode. It's about a beauty contest where the contestants don't realize that the winner is going to get killed, and she's selling coffins. She's going to be the body inside a coffin, and Buck is the MC for this perverse contest. And so we wrote a song for him, and I wrote the lyrics to the song, and getting to write words that Buck Henry spoke.
Yeah,
I could have died a happy person after that. So yeah, absolutely. Oh,
yeah,
Buck was lovely. Our circle comes around yet again.
Yeah, what an extraordinary mind and talent, and and just there were no like, oh, you're this kind of person or that. He was whatever was good, he was interested in. It seemed to me. I did,
The old lady won.
Yeah, of course she won. She was so charming and cute and old. And, you know.
Do you think it was fixed?
No, not at all. Not at all. I think she was, because that's who she was. She was just genuinely charming. And the idea of just this old lady, you know, super old lady from New Orleans. I mean, you know, she had been alive in the 19th century. So, you know, but the thing that was funny for me was meeting the governor of South Dakota, because I had spent 2 summers on a horse ranch in the boonies in South Dakota when I was in high school. And so when I met the governor, you know, I just was like, wow, you know, I spent the happiest months of my life in your state. And then we became just great friends.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
He was sort of my buddy. And he was a really nice guy.
An interesting friend to have.
Yeah.
So you don't get the final. She does. Disappointed, you head back to Vassar.
No, I have to say, I guess I was disappointed, but I really never thought it would. I mean, you know, we tried and everything, but I just never, I don't think it was ever real that it would have happened. So yeah, so I come back to Vassar, and so one of the things that I remember early on at Vassar was seeing a play in the lounge area of Noise. Did you direct that?
I did.
And what was it? Was it an Albee play or?
Oh gosh.
Actually, it was written by feminist playwright Megan Terry, and it was called In the Gloaming, Oh My Darling. It was about 2 old women in a nursing home who smuggle in an old man to help them relieve the boredom.
Alan, I don't know if I ever told you, but I thought it was so cool, because I remember seeing it, and my high school was so weird, and I had jumped to 3 different high schools, and I did spend a year at Andover and burned out, and, you know, anyway, but I didn't really see a lot, and I thought that, I was like, okay, now I'm into something totally different with theater, because it was site specific, it wasn't in a theater space. I remember it was really clean. The acting was a little kind of almost reserved, and the text was interesting and weird. It was new to me. It was modern, and I felt I was like, oh, okay, I'm in a new place now.
One of the cool things about the drama department was that we were a community unto ourselves. And it didn't really matter what year you were, because we all worked on a production. It didn't matter. You might not be a lead, but you might be the part of the tech crew. You might be part of the wardrobe crew. You know, so we all, and when you're all putting on a show together, yeah, there's this common purpose that you all have. It's a wonderful, you know, part of the important part of college anyway is the socialization process.
Yeah.
And in the drama department, it's hyper socialized. It's just how we are in that particular community. That to me was always the appeal. I mean, I grew up a drama-rama. So you did in my middle school and high school, I was a drama-rama. I was in all the plays. And so, yeah, it was, to me, this was just, I was continuing down a path. I actually spent the sophomore year, I wanted to be a film major, because I think I suspected I was going to end up here. But for a year, I was a film major, and I had less to do with the drama department. But then I knew when I was going to take my junior year abroad in Paris, which I did. And I knew when I come back, I wanted to direct one of the projects. I wanted to direct a department. So in order to get myself on the ins, because I was totally on the outs with the department, how was I going to get a directing assignment? I approached Everett Sprinshaw, our director of our professor of dramatic literature, an amazing professor. Mm-hmm. And I pitched him the idea of doing a brand new translation of Strindberg's Dance of Death. And he got so tickled by it that he did it. And because he did it, I got the directing slot.
Very smart.
And so when I came back, I had my directing slot. And we talked the other day briefly as we were catching up. and we'll talk about some of what we talk about if you want to. But we talked about the casting, and as I went back and I ruminated about how I got my cast, I had first choice. They gave me first choice of the whole department.
Wow.
And I knew that Eric Menyuk was going to be my lead. There were a couple of women in the department who could measure up to Eric, big guy, but also his presence really was big. A big thunderous kind of presence. There were a couple of women in the department who could have, but none of them could hold a candle to you. And so as I was thinking about it, I got my 3 leads right off the top. And so when we were talking the other day, I said, well, I didn't quite remember the process, but yeah, I did. You were my first choice. In fact, you were my only choice. And we talked the other day, do you mind if I go here?
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So in the podcast that we did with my former roommate, Brett, we were talking about this very thing, the casting of this play. And Brett and I spoke rather cavalierly about the casting process. And I put on a more contemporary, more recent producer hat as we had the conversation. And I said, I won't describe it. I said that you were perfect casting, and I used the word that you were matronly. I used that word, and I did say, well, you had done SNL, and I guess I was a bit of a star fucker, and so I had to have you. All right. Neither of those things was true, and I apologize for saying them. I thought I was being clever. I was not. At Vassar, how did you get cast regularly? Were you cast as anything in particular?
Always as the old lady, always as a grande dame, and I could do it really, really well. And I'm also big, 6 feet tall and heavy set. And so, yeah, it was awful. And the same thing, one of the reasons I'm glad for the opportunity to talk about it is the same thing happened then when I was at Juilliard. I was again cast mainly as the mother, the grandmother, or some, I can't tell you how many fat suits I wore. And there was a woman and so it was really difficult. It was really actually soul crushing to be. And then I worked with the acting company for 2 years, and my main casting there, I had one part that was my age, but the other were the old ladies. And I think institutions who want to build a rep company do that a lot. And it was really bad back in the day. It still exists today, but it's got to be erased because it's so damaging. It was so damaging for me because it was so long. It's limiting, it's damaging. And so for me, listening to you and Brett talk, and I'm also listening as an actor, which is, ultra sensitive. And, oh shit, I've got one of those things on.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. That was cool. What was that? What was that? That was cool.
When I do a gesture, it Zoom does that too.
That was interesting.
When you were talking about the Actors Workshop, is that John Houseman? Was John Houseman?
Yes.
And was he running it then?
Yes. Well, he wasn't running it, but he was still around.
Yeah.
I met him a couple times. Did you ever meet him or work with him?
No, I just was one of those people always looking for a job and asking those guys, hire me. I'll do anything. Just hire me.
So I'll take a little side route. So I was lucky enough to see the remake of The Cradle Will Rock, which of course Houseman, didn't he do that was it with Orson Welles that they did that?
I don't know.
But anyway, famous because it was pro-union, it was the theater threw him out, and they literally rolled the piano down the street and did it bare bones in a space. So I got to see some of the greatest Juilliard grads do that, and for Houseman. And so Patti LuPone and Kevin Kline and Mary Lou Rosado.
Right.
And at the end of it, Patti LuPone sang When You Wish Upon a Star to John Houseman. And it was one of those great theater moments. But John Houseman also, there's a lot of stories about how mean he could be to some of the students at Juilliard. Yeah, he was pretty mean at times. And but I will circle back to Mary Lou Rosado. I don't know if either of you have ever heard of her, but she was a brilliant, maybe she probably still is a brilliant actor. And at Juilliard, she did a lot of stuff. And like me, she's kind of has a big build. And John Simon, I think it was, that really
critic for New York Magazine.
New Yorker,
and he could be cruel too.
New York or the New Yorker?
No, he was at New York Mag.
New York Magazine.
And oh yeah, he could be cruel. So anyway, so Mary Lou, and VASSAR and Juilliard did a lot of restoration comedy. And let me tell you, nobody could do restoration comedy like Mary Lou Rosado. Absolute genius. I mean, incredible. But at that time, for some reason, he reviewed Juilliard. I think it's because it was early in Juilliard's function, and so Houseman was still around a lot. And but Simon said, "I never thought I'd see the day when there was an actor who was too ugly to be on stage, and now I have." Mary Lou Rosado. So here's this young woman. And so for me, circling back to casting in VASSAR, I just felt so, by the time I graduated VASSAR, I just felt so, even though I had some great parts, like it was really fun to do The Dance of Death, but there was a really vicious review that came out in the college newspaper that attacked my body in very distinct ways. And it was crushing. And so this whole thing about how women who are large are cast is it's getting better as there's better directors and producers. But it can be really damaging. And so, Alan, the thing when I was listening to you and Brett talk, I'm listening, of course, like, what are they saying? And, neither of you mentioned my talent, even though it was misguided how I was doing things, or my spirit, or my, what was repeated was matronly. And so that's why I had the conversation with you about that.
And we are here to deliver the absolute corrective. And as I said, you were cast because you were the best people in the department. You had the chops to do a really difficult. It's a difficult part.
And also, if it's any consolation, he constantly refers to me in the same manner.
I do, indeed.
But wait, Alan.
Oh my God! I have my copy somewhere. I have my original copy somewhere. I do. Isn't that funny?
And I had forgotten, and I'm so glad that you reminded me that Sprinshorn did a translation for us.
Yes.
I mean, that's really special because he was quite an amazing guy. And looking at Bill Jacob, I had forgotten he was in it.
Bill Jacobs, he was one of the, like I said, I got the three actors that I wanted. It was Menyuk, you, and Bill Jacobs, and
the stage manager was Philip Clark, whom and he's great. And then special thanks to John Tenney, and Chris Carney.
Well, John, we were living with John in a townhouse. He was our freshman. He was a freshman at that time, and he was our roommate. And I can't remember specifically why I thanked John. I'm not sure, but it's funny. I ended up hiring John for an episode of Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah, he's a great actor.
Yeah, lovely person.
And you all did, because I was so jealous, that cabaret. and it was directed by Scott Battello, right?
Yeah. And Lisa Zane, except, they took all my songs away because I was so, I was miscast. I should not have, really, if you talk about casting, I had no idea what I was as an actor. After Vassar, I did one audition as an actor. I had no idea what I was as an actor.
Yeah.
Was I a leading man? No, not in anyone's.
Yeah.
No, not in any way, shape, or form was I. And because I had no idea what I was or how to sell myself or what to audition for versus what not to audition for.
Yeah.
It was, part of what, we taught the art of acting, but no one thought about teaching the business side.
They still don't.
Yeah, of acting, which is nuts.
So in my 4th year at Juilliard, I again, my casting for my senior year, which is when the agents come, was terrible. I was playing old ladies everywhere. And I went to one of the directors of the school and I said, I don't have an agent yet. I knew nothing about the business. I didn't even have headshots. But my classmates are getting signed right and left. And I went to him and I said, I don't have an agent yet. Should I be doing something? And he said, no. He said, don't do anything. He said, they'll come running. And I thought, oh, okay. So it's a thing where it's like love. You want to act a little cool. Well, that was like the worst advice. This was a professional school. So I didn't do anything. I worked with agents, but I never got signed. And maybe I wouldn't have anyway. I'm not saying that his thing, but coming out of Vassar, look, I didn't know the first thing about how to really act. Coming out of Juilliard, I hardly knew how to act. I worked for 2 years touring the country, doing plays. It was only when I got to Uta Hagen that I started to, this is how you work on it.
What did Uta reveal?
She was the greatest teacher I've ever had. And I've had a lot of great teachers. Like I had Alexander Technique with Judy Leibowitz at Juilliard, who's like this spiritual being of gorgeousness. First of all, she trucked no foolishness. So, second of all, she really knew how to tell actors how to work on things. So she breaks it down, and her books are just rich in just how to just break it down. Okay, this is how, if you need to make something seem like it's hot, this is how you'll work on it. Her work ethic is so strong, so amazing. And then it was just, there was something, I knew once I got into her class, I knew like, okay, this is the place I got to be. And I finally knew how to work. So I worked every single week for 2 years. And who else worked with her is Craig Bacon.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, he worked with her a lot.
When you say how to work, what do you mean?
Well, so it used to be that I would just sort of throw energy around, that I would try to emote. And sometimes I had instincts. So, I knew how to do. I didn't know the first thing about talking about objective or how to create an emotional energy and then what to do with it other than just emote. And she had very, like her exercises about how to enter a room, bringing in your moment before. And so, I tried teaching it at Brown, and I had a student who hated doing those exercises because they're really boring. Because one of the things she would do is she would make you just be. And I think you and Brett talked about, and Brett said something about just being in front of a camera.
Yes. Well, yes. Acting for the camera is different from acting for the stage, because if you act for the camera's going to see you acting. You'll have to cut it out.
And so she said, well, the thing you do is you bring your life from the moment before. So you've got to go really deep. What are the details? Where am I coming from? What's my mind engaged with? And you would do these exercises, and then you come in and do just daily boring things. But they were never boring when the actor was engaged. And
Right,
so,
but you're also tracing. You're training a muscle.
yes. And so her series, so I taught this to one of my students, and he just hated it. He was just like, this is so boring. And then he got cast in his first film, and he had to make an entrance. And he contacted me, and he goes, I got it.
Yes.
If you get a second chance at life, take it.
Take it.
So since we're now rolling and we're talking, this is the hey. The bad news is technology screwed us up. The good news is technology screwed us up. And the even better news is that you were available, Connie, to help fix some of what the technology did to us. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
You know, as I was editing the episode together, one of the things that I added is bits and pieces of your appearance on SNL.
Do you think you have much
You
of a
look
chance
wonderful.
of
You
winning?
look so incredibly youthful.
Well, I was 18.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's you watching you at 18, so fresh faced and you. It was great fun. The thing I'd quite forgotten was it was actually a pretty good no, it was a really good episode.
It was.
A terrific episode.
Oh, good.
Just because I didn't mean to watch the whole episode, but it was so good. In looking for, because they had the segment where you all, try your ruses with Buck Henry as the last segment. So I was forced to watch the whole SNL episode to get there so I could see it and grab it. But God, among the sketches, Stunt Baby. That's a great fucking sketch.
I mean, this is the thing, is that they were just more raw, a little more honest about their humor. And they gave me a book that included a lot of scripts and also the handwritten notes and stuff. I mean, I'm sure it's something you could probably buy somewhere. And in it was Davis, and what was his partner?
Oh, Franken and Davis.
Franken and Davis.
Tom Davis. There was also a really
And
good
Al
Franken.
Franken.
There was in this episode. There's a great Franken and Davis segment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and they were also great in just, there was an edge to it. I mean, that's a word we use a lot, but there was an edge. And in this book, there was this recipe for cooking placenta. That they wrote. And, it's that
placenta. It was called Placenta Helper.
That's right.
Yeah. And it did not, the censors did not let it on.
That's right. But it's in the book, and I mean, I'm sure that a lot of the writers over the past 20 some years some of them want to write that kind of stuff, but it was so at the heart of it.
It was so raw. There were sketches I still remember. Super Bassomatic.
Oh,
I mean, it so in your face. Well, because it was improv. These were all
but it was
improv.
also, they were willing to be vicious.
Yes. But in the moment.
And really political and in a darker way. And I think they were allowed to be, maybe, because.
Oh, yeah. Some of among the original writers was Michael O'Donoghue from the National Lampoon. And he introduced a segment that was on your episode, the Mr. Mike's Ricky Rat Club.
Oh, yeah.
A really dark, twisted, a dark, twisted version of the Mouseketeers. Really, really funny. Really funny.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to just stay in the space of everything was better back then. But I think, I don't know, but they were probably allowed to be edgier, but they just were. And, I mean, the fact it's been running is some kind of tribute, but John Houseman who was not always a nice man.
So
but
you said.
but I think it was him, or maybe I heard it from Michael Kahn, who was an acting teacher at Juilliard, that you need to change your artistic directors every 10 years, ruthlessly. And, I mean, far be it from me to say that, SNL should change things, because there's been so many of those brilliant, the Bill Hader sketches that John Mulaney wrote. I mean, those things just kill me.
You have remained a fan all this time?
Not really, but every so often something like that will catch me, and it's Bill Hader's performance and Mulaney's writing, the Stefans, those characters, just, it kills me. Anytime I need to be cheered up, I just listen to it. And every so often there are these performers that just are brilliant. Kristen Wiig is
Oh gosh, as
anything, pretty much.
The talent that has come out of that place, really tremendous incubator of
yes and no
talent.
Yes and no, because there's a lot of stories that obviously I don't hear firsthand. So it's all gossip if it's coming from me. But there's a lot of stories about, I think Nora Dunn wrote some things about that it didn't treat everybody well. And specifically, I think, again, I shouldn't even be saying this, but women. And so, in other words, a machine like that's going to chew artists up.
Yes, and spit them out, which is really, my point was simply, it was spewing talent out into the marketplace. Now, a lot of people wanted to get into that and be part of that. I know it was a pipe dream of mine. It was one of the things that was watching you be on that show, incredibly envious. And in the years afterwards, I don't know about you, but I felt rather proprietary toward the original cast. And when they all left after the 5th season, it's funny, I misremembered.
Bill Murray had replaced Chevy Chase.
Yes, that was the 2nd season, and you were in the 3rd season. I misremembered it as the last season. It was the 3rd season. And so actually there was a lot of interesting stuff yet to go. I think in the 4th season, then guys like Harry Shearer joined the cast. There was more of,
who's one of the greatest comedic actors ever.
Harry Shearer.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh.
I mean, just incredible. But I think my point is also, coming out of school so much. I spent so much time in schools, and that, there's a lot of talented people who weren't even hired, who you look back on and you're like, how could you miss that one?
Sure.
And people talk about the audition process for that being pretty rough. And maybe it needs to be because of the physical difficulty of that job.
Well, the challenges, the creative challenges, if you cannot stand the intense heat, if you're going to melt,
or as who's that great actress who did Marcel the Shell, Jenny.
Oh, that's terrific. That's a great piece.
Yeah. Well, so she made the mistake of swearing live and was thrown off. And she's one of the funniest, most terrific actors. And she's just great. But in other words, we know we always know the ones who are celebrated. And we need to kind of stay open to the ones who may have been damaged by it, or it just didn't work out, and try to kind of take a more rounded view.
You make a really cool point. Okay. All right, at some point, Lorne Michaels is going to step down.
Yeah.
Someone suggested the other day, Tina Fey would be the perfect type of person.
I heard that too. I mean, who knows? I mean, I'm hearing
as just a thought in the ether. It would be wonderful, no matter how many steps. It seems like up until recently, and I think recently the nature of the material at SNL has begun to change in a lot of profound ways. A lot of the last couple of seasons, I was away from it for a long time. I just lost. I had no interest in it. And then the Trump years, it suddenly one needed that outlet. One needed in the midst of all the darkness, and they caught something particular about it, and they became, I don't know, for me, I rediscovered them.
Yes, well, and Trump has done a lot of good for a lot of comedians. Stephen Colbert. I mean, it was when he latched on, and and like you said, especially during the pandemic, I so relied on Stephen Colbert and John Baptiste. I I learned to love Seth Meyers. And his corrections is one of my favorite things to watch. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I haven't.
He does this brilliant, I think it's brilliant, of anybody who writes responses to a segment, or sends in like, well, you mispronounced this word, or actually the plural of platypus is platypi, or any of these kind of niggly things. He calls people who write in jackals, and he does one whole segment once a week where he responds to just the jackals. And it's great. It's real.
I must catch that. It sounds wonderful.
I mean, it's really, at first you're like, who's he talking to? Because there's only like the people who work on the show. There's no audience. So you hear like 4 people laugh. And at first you're like, what the hell is this? But I so enjoy it because anyway, but I think that thing about Trump and the pressures of the pandemic and all the other pressures, really comedy becomes increasingly important, and especially intelligent comedy, as Jon Stewart taught us. Well, but Jon Stewart is really out of the SNL,
out of that environment. And it created a comedy.
Where Richard Pryor could do that scene with Chevy Chase.
What an amazing sketch. Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, you couldn't write that today. You certainly, I don't know who would dare do it.
Well, things have changed, and for the better in some ways, but I think, it's that use of comedy in a kind of an old sense of the word, of like the clown who's making fun of the king in front of everybody. It's subversive, but it's got to be smart. And it's also really fun when the performers are great at what they do.
And you had the honor and the privilege of working with a bunch of great performers.
Oh my God.
When you did SNL, you got to
Hilda Radner.
Yeah, wow.
And John Belushi. I mean, John Belushi was, both of them were kind of on another plane. And, there was, and Bill Murray, I mean, he was so young when I was there, and he would just come on. But, they're so phenomenally talented and fortunate, well, John Belushi is obviously the great loss, because we don't know what he would have done. What would be his Barry? Like, what could he have created?
When he got to a certain age and his comedy mellowed in its rough edges, but gained some heft. I think he would have been.
I wouldn't say that his comedy mellowed.
I'm not saying it did, but if he had lived, if he had not died at the Chateau Marmont that night, and continued as with some, really, he was such a bold, in-your-face comic. Well, at a certain point, a bold, in-your-face comic is going to mellow, and it's when they mellow that suddenly other terrific notes would come out. Oh, that's
Oh
what
yeah, right. And
so
and
sad
and
to
if he
think
had
of.
found the great acting role, because he could act.
Yes.
And
Oh my God. Of course, yes. If you can do comedy, you can act.
well, not always. I don't always agree with that. Do
True,
you?
true.
But that's something you believe?
No, no, no. I would say everyone who can do comedy can act, but if if you have the chops in you, if you have the timing, if you can really hear in order to do comedy, because you really got to listen.
Yeah.
You got to be in the moment. If you did a couple years with the Groundlings,
Yes.
let's talk improv because I loved. I took two classes with the Groundlings. Loved the first one.
Mm.
I loved the second one, but by the second one, my teacher kept pointing out to me, "You're writing. Stop writing. Be in the
Oh,
moment." And once I started writing, I couldn't stop.
yeah. Well, that's the hazard of that gift.
But it's what I am, and
Yeah,
uh, but
exactly.
but but no. But that's not why I was writing. I was writing because I didn't have the confidence
To,
to be in the moment.
oh yeah. Okay.
And it really, I lost my nerve is really what happened. So rather than be in the moment and take your risk of flopping, of hey, just be in the moment, who gives a shit?
Mhm,
It's not about that, just be in the moment.
mhm.
I don't know, I started writing instead.
Well, have you ever really like looked at clowning, in the old tradition?
How do you mean?
Well, okay, so I took a class with a great clown teacher, Jane Nichols, and Christopher Bays, and oh God, and this other fellow, oh shoot, Stephen, he taught at ACT for many years, Stephen Bisher. So what I recall from clowning is like it's like comedy improv amped up, which is there is no in between. It works or it fails. And boy, you just have to let it go. But you really have to try something. And but I hear what you're saying about comedy. Yeah, that thing about, well, that's why for me, after all the fancy schools and 2 years with Uta Hagen, it was when I went to the Groundlings because, and this was back in the day when comedy improv wasn't so big. Um, but I went and saw a show that a friend was in, and it was comedy improv. And as I was watching it, my palms were sweating because I was so terrified. And so I was like, oh, okay, if I'm that scared, I got to go try it. And it taught me how to listen better than anything and be in the moment, like you say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, I mean, that also goes right to the work with the horses.
Yes, which is what a wonderful segue.
It was there.
And you took it. Cool. Uh, we talked a bit about your teaching at Brown. What what made you think of horses plus teaching?
Yeah. So, I mean, I had worked with horses when I was younger, and as later in life, when I went to see a free demo by this horse guy, and he kept talking about intention. You have to have a clear intention and your energy behind it. And he just kept saying intention, intention, intention. And so I was like, okay, that's absolutely what acting's like. And then I started experimenting it. I started really studying the kind of horse stuff that this fellow did himself and people he had learned from, and tried to get as much hands-on interaction with horses, which, I didn't own one. So I had to kind of
But
jump
you
around.
but you did have some experience with horses. Horses weren't
Right. Yeah.
strange creatures to
When I
you.
when I was a kid, I had horses. And as a matter of fact, that's why when I was on Saturday Night Live and one of the contestants was the governor of South Dakota. Well, I had spent 2 summers on a ranch in South Dakota just riding horses, but working on training. And anyway, so then I started playing around, and I just realized that that live interaction of a human on foot, a horse on foot, interacting, and there's so much about energy and intention and awareness of your partner. And so, it's
horses are hyper aware of so many things.
yes. So you said you had worked with horses.
Mm-hmm. I did. I have a friend who is involved in horse therapy, and they invited me to try it one time, and I was blown away by. There was one horse in particular that the guy who was running it, that he worked with a lot, and these are horses that did not get ridden. That was not past that point in their life. And the horse, when it was my turn, the horse stood on the other side of the corral. And my mission was to, without moving my arms, just being, was to draw the horse to me, was to make the horse want to explore me, want to know me a little bit better, to give me the chance, maybe even to know it. And it's a little terrifying because it's a big animal, and I'm just a wee little thing. And,
but it should be a little scary.
Well, yes. There's a huge amount of trust involved, and especially as the horse puts its face in yours and sniffs you, and I very much recall as the horse exhaled and I inhaled, there was something, I felt a connection to that horse in that moment. And yeah, me and the horse, we had our moment. And then the horse was done with me, and it was the next person's turn. But yeah, the thing it required was, in a sense, letting go of everything inside me and just being.
Yeah. And see, the horse experiences, how they experience us is different than we experience ourselves, or even other humans experience us. Now, a lot of people talk about horses being prey animals and we're predators. So some people say, well, there's an inherent, not conflict, but tension. I don't know about that, but being a prey animal, it's the horse's job to be hyper aware of everything, and things are more important. So it's a great model for actors. High stakes. Everything is important. What's that sound? Okay, no, it's all right. I don't have to run. And so it's great to have actors in there with the horse. And also the other thing that I really like about it is learning how to really see your partner, really see what they're doing, and not put your own stuff on top of them, but really notice details and make clean observations. So it's very much like Sanford Meisner's work about, what do you see? And then just repeat on it and notice every single change. Because if you're not seeing, and seeing is just one sense, whereas there's actual multiple senses. But if you're not seeing your partner, how can you play off of them?
I would even say sensing.
And yes, I think sensing's a better word. Yeah. And so anyway, so that's been something that's been really super fun. And it's really my current passion is, just learning how to work with horses better, how to get along, how to kind of let them be themselves better. And, there's a lot of cool stuff that's been done, and a lot of amazing work that people are doing all around the world. And they're just beautiful and fun, and, and it is fun to ride them. So
Then
that
there's
is,
that.
yeah.
You going back to Vassar for a second, we talked about Bill Rothwell.
Oh, yes.
We the other faculty members who made an impression on me. I remember Liz Villard.
Yes, I remember her. I didn't have much to do with her, and she, you know,
That's
I was like a little scared of her. I didn't.
That's funny because I had more classes with her than I did with Rothwell.
Yeah, no, I had a lot with Rothwell.
My I would. It makes sense that he would glom onto you and see you as a muse of a
Well,
kind.
I wouldn't say I was his muse, but there was a slot that I really fit in that was of great interest to him.
Yeah. You fit into his world.
Yes.
You made sense to him.
Yes, and I understood him.
Yes.
Because there's a part of me that, I mean, my family wasn't stuffy, but I sort of skirted around some of that patrician old school stuff.
It's funny. For me, I grew up in an upper middle class Jewish suburb outside of Baltimore. My whole neighborhood was upper middle class Jewish kids, doctors' sons, lawyers' sons. Really, I grew up in a cocoon.
Oh.
And when I got to Vassar, man, that was part of why it was exciting to me, because it's like no world I'd ever seen before in my entire life. First of all, Wasp City, man. Wasp. And
that's funny I mean, it sure is historically, and my family's part of that history.
Yeah.
But it's funny that you say that, because so many of my friends from Vassar are Jewish.
Yeah.
And some of my best friends are Jewish.
It happens to the best of people.
Wow.
For me, it was eye-opening.
For me too, in different ways.
It was and again, growing up in a very conventional suburb, a very conventional place where really, hey, I was the butterfly. I'm no one's idea of a butterfly, because it was a drama-rama in high school. So, I did strange things.
But though, Alan, you were strange even at Vassar.
Oh, no. When I got to Vassar, I was.
Well,
man,
I'll tell you,
I remember two people in really in the first couple of weeks that I was there. Her name was Rebecca Lieb. I'm sorry. Yeah, Loeb. Rebecca Lieb and Mitchell
Merlin.
Yeah. They were best of friends.
Yes.
And I remember watching them. They were playing Nazi Spy. They were just running around. They were wearing trench coats and they were playing Nazi Spy. And I said, "What are you guys doing?" They said, "We're playing Nazi Spy." And then they went on playing. And I thought, I'd never met anyone in my life who would do what they were doing. And I loved what they were doing. And I wished I was clever enough to do what they were doing. That's how exciting the world was.
Well, but they're very exciting people. I mean, and they were to me too, and they still are. And I mean, there was a lot of really interesting, bright, adventurous people there. And it is a very small school. So you do get to know people. But my experience of you is that you were a little bit of a wild fellow. Like I told you about the show that you did in Noise Lounge. I was like, oh, okay, this is something new to me, so.
I blame Groucho Marx.
Good.
Everything anarchic. Yeah, I mean, from the time that I was 10 years old, I emulated Groucho Marx. So anything to tear down authority, any way to do it just differently than however anyone else wanted to do it. I don't know. That made sense to me. It's funny, my great grandfather, as my family was emulating from various parts of Europe to these shores, my great grandfather on my father's mother's side, a guy named Havis, while everyone was becoming a citizen, he refused to. He said, "I'm a citizen of the world."
Wow.
And something of that guy absolutely is in my blood. I'm very proud to be an American, but I'm not a joiner. So,
Yeah.
but that's why Vassar appealed to me, because it was filled with people really, yes, like me, and that included you. Hey, I did not know, or if I did know about how you grew up, in going to those very non-traditional schools, I had completely forgotten it. But yeah, so that's why when people like you, when we all had the privilege of getting to play in a place like Vassar,
Yes.
and people, really creative spirits like you and creative spirits like me, coming from these vastly different places. Well, holy shit, that's the whole point of the exercise. Look at what can happen. Anything. It's magnificent.
Yes, and that's where, a good admissions office is really important, so that you can have a Rebecca Lieb and a Mitchell Merling and a Shari Norton and a Carol Goodman and Gary Feinberg and Connie Crawford, Alan Katz, and and all the other people like that we loved. We took inspiration from, whether it was up close or from afar. And like and some of our teachers, and one of the teachers at Vassar who meant a lot to me was, is it John Curtin or Bill Curtin?
It was John Curtin.
John Curtin.
Yeah, Kurten.
Yeah. He was, I don't know, for some reason I really connected with him, and he was just always kind of a solid support system. And I really appreciated him. And, like I've said before, I found my connection with, Julie McGrew, and studying Old Norse with her and Professor Di Maria, or the great, oh shoot, what is his name? The ancient Greek professor, James Day.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember James Day?
I remember he was celebrated.
He was a famous scholar, and he would do sessions where he would sight read, Homer from the Greek, translate it. And I mean, he was brilliant, but very troubled. And
it happens.
He used to sit. I mean, this is just sort of
trouble. Trouble isn't a nice way to put it.
He used to sit, of course he had that huge long beard, and he chain smoked cigarettes, and everybody smoked wherever they wanted pretty much. And he smoked so many cigarettes, he was all yellowed and tarred in the fingers, and he would wear these 3-piece tweed suits. And I remember he'd sit in the, what was the name of that place that was near the mug where you would sit and eat? What was it called?
Oh gosh. Okay.
It was like
in the college center. Yeah.
It was a little cafeteria, but it had little tables.
Yes. Yeah.
He'd sit there and he'd chain smoke, and he would sing these absolutely filthy sea shanties at the top of his lungs. I mean, just just full out. I mean, it was so great. And I don't know. So I was lucky enough to study with him once, and
but this is what made being there great, because it was filled with a bunch of really eccentric people who in the outside world you might not do so well, but here in this community, everyone fed everyone else, and God, I loved my time at Vassar. I loved the idea of a liberal arts education. High school. Now, you didn't go through conventional school, so you're
well. I did. I went to 3 different high schools.
Okay, all right.
So I went to a huge public high school.
Okay, so you got a little bit of regulated schooling.
Yeah, but then I went to Andover Academy. So I went to the high pressure prep school, and then I went to the hippie school. So
okay, I see. Yeah. Okay, I misunderstood the battle order. Well, all right. So none of those places really, well, I can't say definitively, have only had a public education. A public school education is not meant to teach you how to think. It's just not set up for it. It's at the end of the day, you need to be a good little citizen. They kick you out into the world. Maybe you'll vote occasionally. Okay. Don't hurt anybody. It's not until you go to college where really the whole point seemed to me was to teach me how to think.
Yeah, I agree.
Analytically from all these different ways.
Yep. And it's really under assault right now.
Of course it is. From whom and for what reason? Because teaching people how to think is a very dangerous thing. It makes them
from a liberal
progressive. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is really under assault. And I mean, there's a lot of problems with, I teach at a liberal arts school, and there's a lot of issues there. And, but the assault on truly liberal arts is really, we're in it. We're just right in it. And
when they're banning books, yeah, yeah, you're definitely there.
Or when Elise Stefanik can get the president of Harvard, basically, I mean, they say she resigned, but what choice did she probably have? I mean, it's really scary.
There were accusations of
plagiarism.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Which really, it was false. She didn't plagiarize. It was the notes weren't quite accurate in terms of it was fiddly stuff, which the guy who brought the accusation, his wife was guilty of the exact same infractions.
Yeah, I heard that.
Stop it.
Well, but
this is this is political. It's got nothing to do with anything else. It's
I mean, we're in it. And as you're saying, having had the benefit of being a young person in that atmosphere, like I expected to go to Vassar for a year and then I was going to transfer, but I so loved it that I just stayed. And I mean, and I worked really hard, both in the theater and in the the studying of the old English, but and these students there, I mean, you have young, but they need it. They need to have a place where they meet people who are very different from themselves, and then are forced to think critically, read critically, write critically, and be able to talk to different people with different ideas.
And to fail a little bit.
And to fail a lot.
Mm-hmm. Best thing for any
ever.
of us.
As long as it's not too deep a fail. It's got to be
structured failure.
Well, I wouldn't say structured. I would just say, what would I say? Just, it can't be cataclysmic, because that can just destroy a spirit.
Oh, always possible too. But if there was a way to design failure into teaching, not of the teaching, but so that really there was going to be failure, because that's the only place where the actual teaching happens.
But you have to fail as a teacher, though, too.
Oh,
as I mean,
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Success only teaches you that your shit doesn't smell, and that's that's bullshit. Your shit never stops smelling. Now you're doomed to fail, friend. Yeah. Anyway, with all of your students, you do such a wonderful Bill
Rothwell.
Bill Rothwell. Thank you. You do such a wonderful Bill Rothwell. Do your students do you?
Yes. So speaking of clowning, that's a very common clown. And I actually think Stephen Bisher is the one who taught me this. It's very useful sometimes to have your students imitate you, or do a clown version of you. Now, it doesn't always land well with me. It's sometimes I'm like, oh, I do that. But you take what you see, you water it down, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see how that's working, that's not working. And it's a really useful, it's fun too, because they get to make fun of you. But it's also really useful to say, okay, really, how am I coming across?
Surely.
Okay, I can see, yeah, that I got to tweak, and that's working. And so, I mean, it's really,
You actually get to see how you are being perceived.
yes,
Wow.
because as you know from, I mean, as you know from directing or leading, and when you take control of a room or try to lead a room, well, it's like the horses. you know, there's some horses that, yeah, you might need to grab the halter and say, you got to come now. Or some circumstances where it's like, sorry, we don't have time, we got to go now. But there's other times where you're like, hey, could you? Do you think? Oh, okay, not now, And it's like, how do you get them to want to come? And really, the idea for me is how do you, my goal is by the end of the semester, I don't do anything. I just show up in class and they do everything. So it's a bit like Bill Rothwell, except for different reasons of like, you're all exhausted, go home. No, it's like, I want to walk in the room and they're like, oh, and they're talking to each other and they're working on their own things and they check in every so often, but they don't really need me anymore. If I can do that, then I feel pretty good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Before I ask you my last question, I wanted to give you a chance to mention among your really most interesting credits, you were in the cast of Orpheus Descending that Peter Hall directed. Sir Peter Hall.
Sir Peter Hall, please.
That was some interesting people in that cast. Who else was in that cast?
Sloane Shelton,
Right.
Tammy Grimes,
Right.
and a bunch of other great Brad Sullivan. I don't know if did you ever see Brad Sullivan?
I did not.
You see him in a lot of stuff. I don't know what big parts he had, but just one of the greatest, not just a great actor whose acting is completely invisible. He's so good. You're just like, there's nothing. It's not that he's sort of still in that kind of shut down filmic way. It's just like, it's just there. You don't see any force.
One of the things that we learned that really stuck with me, and I don't know why, it's learning how to give stage.
Yeah.
It's an important piece of acting because you are helping to create the environment, not just for yourself, but for everybody else.
It's a form of listening and understanding. And that's also where the comedy improv is so great, is who has the best idea in the moment, and then you got to give it to them.
Yes, and
unless you're like Mae West. Do you know the story about Mae West and the glass?
No, go for it.
Okay, so I love Mae West, and I'm always trying to tell my students to go watch Mae West because as you know, she was not the sort of European conventional beauty. And yet she made herself that. And she was also such an entrepreneur and, writing and producing and all that, and funny. And I just rewatched She Done Him Wrong. But anyway, so this is the story. Don't know if it's true, but I love hearing it. So I'll tell it again, which is she's in a play with some young ingenue, and the ingenue thinks she's it, and Mae West says, honey, I'm going to upstage you and I won't even be on stage. And so the ingenue has her big monologue, and she stands on stage, and Mae West takes a sip of water from a glass and then puts the glass just on the edge of a table. So it's in a precarious spot. So the whole audience is just like, is it going to fall? And the ingenue's up there acting up a storm, and nobody cares.
She
I
was
just,
wonderful, wonderful. I'm a huge W.C. Fields fan.
oh,
So yes, that whole group of early 20th century comedians, yeah, they're integral to everything that I understand about comedy.
just incredible. And you can watch them do little moments over and over and over again. I mean, the timing is so sublime. And especially W.C. Fields, like at the dinner table with his kids and the salt or what happens to the coffee. And it's just incredible what he can do.
His
And
his ability to use stillness, silence, to fill silence with a kind of dread, which is where the comedy comes from. In It's a Gift, Mr. Muckle walks. He has a store, and he just set up
oh
a
my
whole bunch
God.
of light bulbs. And a blind man named Mr. Muckle walks into the store and destroys every single light bulb. It's just fantastic. A great piece of physical comedy. It's built, it's structured, it's designed, and that's what they did.
Oh, every part of that. That's the film where I was thinking about the family at the table.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And
There's mm.
and then have you ever seen him in I think it's Great Expectations where he plays Mr.
Mr.
McCawber?
McCawber. Oh, he was made for Dickens. Made for
Just
it.
but so W.C. Fields like Mae West. I mean, Mae West is interesting to me also because of how she made her own work happen.
Totally self-invented.
And as a woman, you know, defied the stereotypes.
Mhm.
Because the casting, as I've talked about with you, the casting for me has been so difficult, and I've had a hard time dealing
Yeah.
with it in my life. And she just took it
She
and
owned
made
her
it.
shit. She really did. And she, wow, it's funny. It's like her story almost demands to be told right here, right now, because she was such a powerful woman at a time when women weren't. How'd she do that?
Well, first of all, it was pre-code.
But
So
then after Code, she still had a career
when did code hit? Do
in
you
the
remember?
1930s, and she was still making movies in the early
Yeah, she was
1940s.
making movies in the 33 was She Done 'Em Wrong.
Hmm.
Maybe it wasn't pre-code. I don't know. But so dirty. I mean,
Oh gosh, yes,
so
yeah.
funny. And anyway, I don't know how I got off on Mae West.
Well, with Mae West in mind, we'll finish with the couple of awards you
Oh
won.
no, can I I
Oh
want to
yeah, okay. We'll cut all
Yeah.
that out. Carry
So
on from where you were.
Yeah, because I wanted to talk about Orpheus Descending a
Oh
little
yes,
bit.
yes. Go. Yes.
Because so I met somebody in England once who said to me, "Well, you're too tall to be an actor. So you need to be as good as Vanessa Redgrave." And so when I got cast in Orpheus Descending with Vanessa Redgrave, I just felt like I had come home. And let me tell you, watching her live, just phenomenal.
How so?
She's alive in every single moment she's on stage. And that whole thing about the acting being invisible, she's so present all the time. Like one time, I had this great little part where I ran in and I made an angry phone call. And the door that I ran through had a bell on it because it was a shop. And I ran through once and I hurt the bell. And Vanessa Redgrave came like tearing across the stage at me and just delivered her lines like with such ferocity. And I was truly like, oh, sorry, but I got to go make my phone call. And because I had damaged her bell.
She was so in the moment.
She was so in the moment and fearless about
Yeah. She just went with it.
just
Yes.
here it is.
Yes,
Yeah.
and
And yet it was also backed up by research because her character's family was from Italy. I think the lady might have been born in Italy. And at one point in the play, it's Tennessee Williams, she picks up a violin and just plays a little tune from her hometown in Italy. Well, of course, Vanessa Redgrave learned how to play that style of violin, fiddle, we would call it, so that she could just do it so casually, like it was nothing. And, so you have this great talent and, but backed up by research. And then she was so generous and, you know, everybody was always invited to go do stuff with her. And, I worked on this whole other project because that was the year that the wall in Berlin came down. And, she's a very active socialist. And so for her, this political event was huge. So she organized this huge event where she gathered all these artists to come and raise money. And I mean, the people who were there were just incredible. Like I remember Andre de Shields singing What a Wonderful World. And they did a scene from, I think, The Three Sisters with Corin Redgrave, who is one of the great actors, Lynn Redgrave, Christopher Reeve, and Sigourney Weaver. I mean, it's just like incredible.
Yeah. Pinch me.
And working on that show was I mean, that's obviously the biggest job I ever had. But it was just so much fun. Oh, you know who I got to meet was Myrna Loy.
Oh, cool.
I mean, she was sitting backstage one day and she just had her hair was perfect. She's wearing a full-length mink. I mean, yes, don't kill the animals, but she's such a movie star. And, and I was like, because the guy who ran the door was Doug Abel. No, not Doug Abel, Douglas Carter Bean, who wrote To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything.
Oh, gosh, sure.
Yeah, so he's a playwright who's running the door, right? As many of them are. And anyway, he calls me on the intercom and he goes, Connie, you got to come down and see Myrna Loy's here. So I came running down and I made some excuse to go get water from the fountain near her. And I spilled everything because I was like fumbling. And she said, oh, she's just dying for some water because she knew what I was doing, but it was just being around that level of actors.
Yeah.
And Tammy Grimes, I mean, you want to talk about stories. And I understudied Tammy. And we were in Midtown, okay? We were at the Neil Simon Theater, so 52nd Street. And one time the cab let her off a few blocks from the theater and she got lost walking to the theater. And Midtown, it's a grid. So I was putting on my makeup to go on for her.
Oh boy. She was lost somewhere in Midtown.
I mean, she got there and she was great, but anyway, thanks for letting me reminisce about that, because really being around Vanessa Redgrave was profound.
Oh, sure. We've both been very lucky in that way, just getting a chance to work with people, getting to work with. I mean, meeting these people is cool, but I don't know, getting to work with these people, that's been the rarefied air.
Yeah, and sharing that energy, and you being part of the room. Yeah.
It's really, really special.
Yeah, and we're lucky to be here today.
Amen. No argument, sister. To finish, I wanted to point to a couple of awards you won, and I wanted to give you a chance to talk about them. You are a proud winner of the Kevin Kline Prize for Best Comic Stage Fight and the David Mamet Prize for Best Stage Fight. Wow.
Yeah, so that was at Juilliard.
Cool.
And we were taking a fight class with B.H. Barry, who was just...
B.H. Barry is on Broadway. He's the guy. He's the fight guy, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. And what a great teacher. And his whole team. I remember the people that came into class with, it was just so great. It was so much fun. So he did this where we designed our own fights and presented it to all these fancy people and won prizes, And so I don't even remember what the David Mamet fight was. But I was good at the fight stuff. But
what particular fighting did you enjoy most? We're talking about fencing. We're talking about hand-to-hand combat. What are we talking about here?
Mostly the hand-to-hand stuff I liked.
Huh.
But I think I could have really gotten into fencing or any other kind of weapon work. But it's such great training for actors. And it's just fun. I mean, everybody loves it. But anyway, so for the Kevin Kline, there's a great actor named Greg Jabara who was in my class, and wonderful actor, great comedian. He's on, is it Blue Bloods? Is that the show that's on TV?
Yeah.
And I think he's there, and he won a Tony, and I honestly don't know what for, but he's just terrific. But anyway, back in the day, he had a lot of black hair and a big kind of jaw, and he looked like Fred Flintstone. So we took in the Boom Boom Room, and we rewrote the fight scene in the Bam Bam Room. And I was Wilma, and he was Fred, and it was such fun.
I wish someone had videotaped it. I'll bet it was.
It's probably better remembered.
But I suppose that's true about so many things, and yet I'm so glad that we've had this chance to remember. Gosh, it's one of the things I'm so glad that I'm doing this podcast, because it's been my motivation to catch up with people I would never have caught up with otherwise. And that would have been such a loss. Thank you so much for sitting down again with me, in spite of our technical difficulties, as we're fond of saying here, we only think we have the technology. The technology has us.
Thanks so much for reaching out, Alan.
I'm so glad I did. I have so many more questions and stuff that I want to talk to you about. Like I said, we were talking about something the other day. Did I not suggest a podcast to you for something that you were doing?
Yes, about the horses, because I'm about to jumping into an experiment.
Okay. Stick a pin in that. I'm going to circle back to that because it's such a cool idea. I'm going to nudge you about that.
Okay, good. All right.
And if it ends up with getting to work together creatively on a project, glory hella fucking Luya. I'm so there. So great to talk to you again. Great to reconnect. And hey, who knows where anything goes in this crazy mixed up world of ours. And thank you, everyone, for listening as always, and we'll see you next time. The How Not to Make a Movie podcast is executive produced by me, Alan Katz, by Gil Adler, and by Jason Stein. Our artwork was done by the amazing Jody Webster, and Jason Jody, along with Mando, are all the hosts of the fun and informative Dads from the Crypt podcast, followed up for what my old pal the Crypt Keeper would have called terrific crypt content.